Okay, so within the two main things that make up the surface of the Earth, the face of the Earth, I had said we had oceans and continents. So we just looked at all the ocean features. Now we're going to look at some of the continental features that we have. So the major features on the continents can be grouped into two distinct categories. Some of them are uplifted regions or deformed rocks that make up the mountain belts of today, and extensive, flat, stable areas that have eroded nearly to sea level being the other ones. So the mountains are the most prominent features probably on the continents. They tend to be linear and tend to be near the boundaries of continents or what used to be previous continents. So we'll touch a little bit more on this in the next chapter when we go over plate tectonics, so you see what I mean. But again, they tend to be linear and tend to be near the boundaries of continents or near the boundaries of previous continents. The younger mountain belts, which we consider to be less than 100 million years of age, tend to be more pronounced than the older mountain belts. And by pronounced, I mean kind of like a little bit more jagged peaks to them. Usually they tend to be higher elevation, and they also lie on the edges of current continents. And we'll see why this is again on the next chapter. The older mountain belts tend to be lower in elevation than the younger ones. So again, by old, I mean greater than 100 million years old, okay? So they tend to be lower elevations, they tend to be more subdued, if you would, with less jagged peaks, so a little bit more softer topography. And also, they're not always on continental margins, or not on the current continental margins. But they used to be when they were first, when they first rose up, they were on some sort of continental margin. All right. So an example to this is, for example, the Ural Mountain up in Russia. Okay, another part of the continent, so again we had two main subdivisions within them as well, one being the mountain ranges and then the other one being this stable kind of flat interior, is again the stable interior. So the stable interior of the continents, which we also call cratons, have been relatively stable and unchanged or undeformed for greater than 600 million years or even longer. Okay, so sometimes old meaning 1 billion years or more. So over time, these rocks have been eroded and now they sit pretty flat, but may have some point at some point in Earth's history, they may have been part of some sort of mountain building episode. Okay, so within the stable interiors, there are areas known as shields, which are expansive flat regions composed largely of deformed igneous and metamorphic rocks, where sediments are simply on top of. It is in this shields where we typically find the oldest rocks on Earth. In fact, these photos that you have right here, the bottom two photos, are on the Canadian Shield. This is in a city called Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories of Canada. I was able to live here for 1 year when I was in high school, and it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. But what you're seeing there is this rock that has been very polished, so you can tell that erosion has definitely taken place, and it's very flat for the most part. In these shield areas, you mostly just have flat spaces of rock that is igneous and metamorphic in origin, for the most part, that has been eroded and is simply sitting as a stable interior. So differing from shields are the stable platforms. So stable platforms are cratons that have been covered by sedimentary rock and have either not been deformed or have been slightly deformed, making basins and domes. So a stable platform can be anything that you find, for example, in the Great Plains of the US. So these are areas where, just like shields, they have been probably eroded They may have been some sort of mountain building event very, very long time ago, and they have been eroded and subdued into these very flat areas that then later, by deposition, got covered by the sedimentary rocks. And since this deposition of sedimentary rocks have either not been deformed at all, or they have been deformed very slightly, so not very much change to them. And if they have been deformed again, they make up what we call basins or domes. Here shows you the different features of continents, those four main features that I talked about. The two subdivisions between the mountains, and then the two subdivisions between the cratons. So you can see the younger mountains, which again are considered to be less than 100 million years old, are going to be the yellow ones. So those would be, for example, the Andes or the Rockies or the Himalayas. But then you have the old mountains as well, which we consider, for example, the Appalachians, the Caledonian Belt, or the Ural Mountains. So those are going to be older mountain belts. And then you also have the subdivision between the two types of craton. So you have the shields, which are going to be areas where there's exposed igneous or metamorphic rock. So one of the shields that is pretty large is the Orinoco Shield, and I've been able to sort of touch on this area. And also the Canadian Shield, which is where I showed you the pictures of Yellowknife. Yellowknife lies right here, just a little bit north of the Great Slave Lake. So those are your shields. And then in gray, you have the stable platforms, which is pretty much everything else that I haven't pointed out yet. So again, as I told you, most of the interior US is made up of the stable platform. All right, so by covering oceans and continents, we finished the last bit of the first chapter of Introduction to Geology, physical geology, I should say. I'm not going to cover the rock cycle in this chapter because we'll look at it in depth in chapters, where are they, 4, 7, and 8, I believe, when we cover igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic rock. So I'm not going to go through the rock cycle in this chapter, but we'll cover it thoroughly later. And again, you'll be tested on most of this, but I will definitely be posting study guides for you to concentrate on the main topics. And through the activities and quizzes that we'll do in class, you'll be able to perform well in the exam. So if you have any questions, you know where to contact me. Best of luck.